Good morning. My name is Colin Diaz, and I'm the Western Regional Director for Chambers for Innovation and Clean Energy. Chambers for Innovation and Clean Energy is a network of 1,300 chambers of commerce and economic development organizations that work to advance clean energy economy. We make the business case for clean energy, focusing on promoting clean energy policies and programs that advance competitive markets, reduce costs for consumers, and maintain the security and reliability of energy supply. Founded and led by former chamber executives, CICE works with both large and small chambers and economic development organizations throughout the United States, across red and blue states, and urban and rural communities. Today, we're going to look forward to hosting a panel of experts for a discussion on the rising energy demand. As I'm sure you're all aware that are attending with us today, the last few years have seen energy demand rise for several reasons, many of which we'll talk about today in our discussion, with the focus of most of that on economic and secure ways to address the demand. And with changes in terms of federal energy policies and the reconciliation bill, energy prices are likely to rise. You'll see in our chat here momentarily that there'll be a link to a budget bill that we have, information that we had crafted on the budget bill. And so with that, I'd like to begin. But before we do, a couple of housekeeping rules. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A function. Please use that to populate any questions that you have. We encourage you to submit those questions as they come up. We will either answer them within that function or raise them during our conversation. This webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available after this on our website as well as YouTube. And with that, I'd like to kick us off. So I'd like to first introduce Melanie Edwards Barton, who is the CEO of Sky Islands Partnership, to set the context for today. Melanie, thank you for joining us.
Thank
Um,
you, Colin.
if you would, tell us, what does the energy landscape look like in your area in Southern Arizona, and what do you see from an economic opportunity?
So we are down southeastern Arizona. We are very rural. And so when we talk about energy demands in rural areas, we have a lot of opportunities and challenges, both being rural. And so it's a little different here than it is being in Tucson or in Phoenix, where those metro areas, a lot of population, a lot of energy demand there as well. But when it comes to us, our challenges down here in rural Arizona, obviously we have vast sizes between, or areas between each of our small towns. And so we have a lot of land, and that's important, but it's hard sometimes to get that energy from one location to another, especially to the small towns. So that is definitely a challenge that we have. But with that, that also brings opportunities to our area. So opportunities, obviously, we have a lot of open land down here. So when you're looking at solar projects, we have available space. And so that's absolutely helpful down here. And it positions us as well to be a key role player in Arizona's growing energy demand, because we do have that space. So we do have some current projects, some completed and some in the works, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later on in the webinar. But with those existing projects and the current or the upcoming projects, we have what we're looking at for our economy down here is hundreds of construction jobs in producing that. And then long-term operations roles, very important as well. And then, of course, millions in new investment and tax revenues for our rural communities. And that means a lot down in the rural area. Ripple effects from that are obviously local restaurants see the impact of that, our hotels, our contractors and suppliers, our service providers, all of those will see a major impact. Tax revenues that strengthen our schools and our county services. And then, of course, for us here, energy development equals workforce development and career pathways for our future students. So looking ahead, we talk about clean energy. We need clean, affordable solar energy. It makes our region more attractive for manufacturing, for logistics, and for technology employers, which is really important for us down here. So for us, energy development, like I said, isn't just about power. It's one of our strongest economic development tools that we have in rural Arizona. So for us, it means jobs today. It means stronger communities tomorrow, and it means a bigger role in shaping the state's energy future as well.
Thank you for sharing that. You really did set the tone because a lot of, as I was mentioning, the economic piece is going to be huge. I think sometimes people think energy and they don't think of even the jobs to that come initially with the infrastructure, but then the ongoing, the economic impact. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to move into bringing the rest of our panelists. If you guys can join me on screen. So with the dynamic energy landscape, as you already heard some of so far, we certainly appreciate you all for joining us today and thank our experts for sharing their insight. So I'm going to briefly introduce them. I would go through their bios, but we don't have time on this call, so I'll just be very brief. Blaise Caudell, who is the Deputy Director of Resiliency with the Arizona Governor's Office of Resiliency. Thank you for joining us. We have Chris Clark, President and CEO of the Queen Creek Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us, Chris. Jim Rounds, well-known economist with Rounds Consulting Group. You've already met Melanie and you know who I am, so let's dive right into it. We want to talk about, obviously, the factors that are driving Arizona's unprecedented electricity demand. So let's start by looking at some of the facts and figures of the electric demand in Arizona. Arizona's data centers, and I'm quoting this, could more than double their energy usage by 2030. So in the next 5 years, according to a 2024 report by Electric Power Research Institute, consuming up to 16.5% of the state's total electricity. That's a pretty significant number. And data centers are not the only source of demand growth that we've seen, given Arizona's growth and successfully brought in numerous manufacturers through the years. So, Chris, I'm going to kick this first question to you, or the next question, excuse me, to provide provide a little bit of perspective on what you're seeing in your community in terms of energy demand in Arizona.
Well, I think we're a pretty good example of what's going on. So Queen Creek is a hyper growth area, and we're seeing all types of advanced manufacturing. The LG Energy Solutions looking to locate here, either in Queen Creek or right adjacent to us in Mesa. And so recently, just looking at it from an energy perspective, SRP hit one of their peak load days a few weeks ago at basically 8,550 megawatt hours. Just looking at the projects that are circling right now, looking for a home, you're looking at about 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts just in those proposed facilities alone. And that doesn't account for, of course, the population growth as well. So over the next 10 years, it was projected that our part of the valley would need twice as much energy. It's looking like that might be an understatement. So really, we're going to have production from all areas full out just to keep up with demand.
And that's a staggering statistic. I mean, I think when you hear, regardless of whether you understand, a megawatt or what the true demand is, but to hear something that's going to be 3 to 5x is pretty significant in a small amount of time. So thank you for sharing that. Jim, I'd like to go over to you next. In terms of concrete metrics, what can you tell us about the current situation in Arizona if you had to give a snapshot of energy trends? And I know when we spoke before, you had mentioned a little bit of an analogy you gave with the road. So if you want to share that, I think for me, it gave a lot of context to what you were talking about.
Sure. So I think when people think of energy, even if we identify that as important infrastructure, it's still hard to get their mind wrapped around. And so one of the ways that we communicate with individuals when we bring up infrastructure is we'll show a slide of a road and we'll say, is this an economic development investment? Everybody says, well, of course, that's how you ship products back and forth. People drive back and forth to work. And then I go to a slide of a transmission line. Is this an important investment? And then it clicks because you have to equate it to something else. But something that Chris brought up is really important to note. So economics does not like imbalances. Now, we have all this potential demand for this energy because we have a great economic future in front of us because of all the things that have been done since the Great Recession. But if we don't keep up with the energy demand, then the way things will get back into balance is we'll have slower growth. And instead of the reversal that we've had from lower wage jobs to higher wage jobs in terms of our business recruitment, we'll shift back to how we were before. So we will get back into balance. Supply and demand will get back into balance, but it'll be a weaker economy if we do nothing. It'll be a stronger economy if we're more proactive with it.
Thank you for sharing that, and it makes a lot of sense. Blaze, I'm going to ask for you to give a little bit of context. Obviously, your office is involved with the entire state as well. What can you say in terms of the demand increases and in data centers with other commercial and residential customers? And then could you also speak briefly on the function of the Arizona Corporations Commission as it relates to that?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much, Colin, for having me today. Really appreciate the time and appreciate being able to be part of such an incredible panel today. So I want to give a little context first about just the Office of Resiliency and what the Office of Resiliency does and our role within state government. So the Office of Resiliency was actually one of the first actions of the governor when she was inaugurated in 2023. We function as the state energy office as well as the natural resources advising shop, if you will, for the governor. So not only do I serve as the deputy director for the Office of Resiliency, or our state energy office and our kind of program side of things. But then additionally, I also serve as the energy policy advisor to the governor, and get to do all of the fun energy things. So again, just really appreciate being able to be a part of the conversation today. Um, I think you've heard this from Chris and Jim already as well, but we're seeing unprecedented growth in the state, and it's absolutely incredible. Our electric utilities are citing generally about a 40% increase in peak demand over the next 15 years. And I mean, it's really just showing how much Arizona continues to be one of the fastest growing states in the nation. And we've really been solidifying ourselves as that hub for semiconductor manufacturing and really building the future of tech for the entire country. Uh, it's important to note, though, that as we talk about that 40% increase over the next 15 years, and I think oftentimes people will just jump to, oh, well, it's data center related. That's not always necessarily true. Whereas you have a large growth in data centers, which are necessary for the continued growth of the digital economy, we also are seeing incredible growth in manufacturing, and just an overall growth in population and economic landscape in Arizona. So with such strong business and manufacturing growth, people from all across the nation are coming to Arizona, and we want to be able to continue to build in Arizona where families can continue to thrive. Um, Part of that is obviously the Corporation Commission. So to your point, what is the role of the Corporation Commission? Arizona is very unique in comparison to most other states in this fashion. The Arizona Corporation Commission is Arizona's Public Utility Commission. Unlike most states, though, the ACC is an independent constitutional body and really honestly a functional fourth arm of government. So it's a five-member commission that's elected statewide and has plenary authority over rate making and service quality in Arizona. So whereas the commission can make rates and is charged with rate making authority, the legislatures can still determine energy policy for the state. And the executive comes in many ways around the processes for citing, really administering and enacting those laws that are passed by the legislature, and really over the agencies. And so when we talk about the executive and the governor's office, we're able to leverage state resources, state land department as a prime agency for that. And as we continue to do that, as we continue to work with our state agencies, we'll continue to build the future of energy here in Arizona.
And Blaze, you bringing up the ACC, I think, is a really good point. In the past, it's been more discussed as utilities or APS, whatever group is going in front of them will suggest we need some additional infrastructure, but we want more economic development to be brought to the entity. Now, the commissioners don't think that they're an economic development entity, but they are, and I would like more analyses. When there's a rate increase, you have a ratepayer. Well, the economic investment creates benefits for the taxpayer in the state. The ratepayer is also a taxpayer. So we have to start looking at the cost to the ratepayer the benefits to the taxpayer, who are the same people, and have a little bit more of thorough discussion. So I'm glad you brought that up. I feel like that's one area in terms of public policy where Arizona can step it up a bit.
Yeah, and honestly, Jim, to your point, it's hitting on that conversation around, okay, how are we balancing energy, right? So we're looking at affordability, reliability, what are the benefits to the community? What are the benefits when we're talking about economic development, for example? But then also, how are we ensuring that ratepayers aren't fronting the cost or bearing the cost of a lot of investments? And I think from the executive perspective, we do have the Residential Utility Consumer Office, RUCO, that's a part of the governor's cabinet. RUCO really is charged with being able to advocate on behalf of residential customers at the Corporation Commission, and will intervene at the Corporation Commission. I think that the commission itself also is poised to take on exactly what you're talking about, that more holistic view around economic development and how these investments are really building Arizona up. And I do think, I mean, having worked with the chairman in a previous life, I think the chairman is very much focused on that. He is very much focused on being able to continue the economic growth in the state and keeping that in mind. So I definitely agree with you. I think the commission would play a very vital and critical role in that. And I think that this commission, with this chairman in particular, could take that up.
I appreciate both of you sharing that, because it is definitely intrinsically linked. And I don't know if most people understand how closely related those are. Well, we've established a pretty strong demand, not anything new to anyone here, and probably most of the people on the call. Let's start to talk a little bit about solutions. And Melanie, I'm going to go to you on this one. Where do you see growth in renewable energy, in particular solar, as you mentioned earlier in your area? And then how do you speak to your members in the community about that? Because obviously, depending on where you are and who you're speaking to, the place that you start in terms of renewable energy conversation is going to be vastly different. So what does it look like in your area?
So we do have quite a few different projects going on regarding renewable energy down in southeastern Arizona. I'm going to name two. We have one that's already producing energy. That's the McNeil Solar and Storage. And so that one's producing already, which is great. We have a couple of upcoming projects. The Herbie Solar and the Dahlia Solar are also. And again, with those, you're talking hundreds of construction jobs coming up. Again, long-term operations positions and millions in investment. And so that's when you're talking with your community and community members, the way you relate that is really important. And so when I talk about energy, I think for most of us that aren't specifically in that field, when we think about energy, whether it's renewable or not, it's this huge topic that we don't understand. And so I like to break it down so that it hits us all on a personal level. And so bringing it down to the basics. So literally my conversation is, do you want to be able to charge your car when you go home? Do you want to be able to blow dry your hair? Do you want to be able to turn your AC on when it's hot? These are important questions. And inevitably the answer is always yes. Everybody wants to be able to do that, but then we don't want to have a conversation about renewable energies and how we're going to generate more energy so that we can continue making this happen. And with the energy consumption that's happening in Arizona and will be growing and is growing and will continue to grow, we have to figure out how we're going to still power that so we can still blow dry our hair. How do we make this happen? And so I really try to break it down to and get as basic as possible. But everybody who's spoken today is absolutely correct. We're not just talking solar here, we're talking about all types of energy. And how do we bring all of those together? How do we ensure that we are innovative? I mean, years ago, we didn't know what solar was. We didn't have wind. We didn't have all of these additional renewable energy sources. This was all invented. And so now we have these. And so I think it's that mindset. And so when I talk with them about that, I try to break it down to that level so that everybody can understand that we're all using it and we all want it and we all need it. But how do we play a part in ensuring that we're doing it responsibly, but then we're also looking towards the future and working together in partnership to create more energy, not just for us, but across Arizona and across the nation. So that's kind of how we break it down. individually, but then when we're talking with businesses, we really talk about the economic development, the workforce development. You know, we want local jobs here. We want local careers, actually. That's what we want. And energy is our future. And so we really need to work together in creating an ecosystem for energy down here.
I appreciate you sharing that. A lot of takeaways there. I think making it relatable is a wonderful way to go about it. People definitely, I can tell you, the air conditioning piece resonated with me. The blow dryer, maybe not so much, but definitely the air conditioning piece. Jim, I'm going to pass it to you, kind of taking a little bit more onto the business side of this. Um, how are businesses addressing their energy needs, including clean energy factors? And then Melanie kind of started to touch on this, and I've heard this regarded before about meeting the energy demand, that there needs to be, I think she was mentioning, there's a lot of um, resources that need to be at the table. So what would you say are important resources to be there? What should the approach be? I'll let you start with that.
Well, we have to start taking a look at our long-term forecasts, our basically our opportunities, and doing some back of the napkin analysis. It's the same thing with workforce as well. All of these major infrastructure, workforce is intellectual infrastructure, so it's part of the discussion. But with energy and workforce, we're not going to be producing enough in order to hit these long-term forecasts. So it's an opportunity, though, for us to get to these long-term forecasts and create a lot more jobs. So we have to, diversify our sources of energy. But one of my biggest worries is, do you remember when we had that water supply hiccup in the North Valley? And it made, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, and we needed everybody in economic development and politics to be writing letters and things like that to explain that Arizona didn't have a water shortage. Can you imagine what would happen if we started having brownouts? What do you think would happen to the recruitment opportunities for entities like GPEC and the ACA and others? It could be devastating. And so this is one thing where we cannot fall behind. Transportation is something that you can't fall behind because it's hard to catch up because of the cost. But if you do fall behind a little bit, there are opportunities to catch up. If we fall behind as being a premier location for a lot of this high tech, it's going to cost us not just jobs, but high wage jobs and a lot of tax revenue that can be used to reinvest in the community or provide even more competitive, tax rates, regulatory environment, things like that. You have to have the right balance. And I think that that's what we're talking about, is that energy is part of this broader balance that Arizona has been doing a good job bringing to the table.
Makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you sharing that. Chris, I wanted to weave you into this question just to speak a little bit about your experience at Queen Creek with LG Energy Solutions and others, and what that might look like in comparison with the overall Arizona business opportunity in the business community.
Right. I think Jim just touched on something as well, which is the brownout, or even a fuzzy connection at some point. We have CMC Steel here, which is one of the largest steel producers and recyclers. Their cost for stopped production at the wrong point in their process is hundreds of thousands of dollars. Intel, if they were to have that situation, can lose millions of dollars in a single incident. So really important that we have that reliable supply that Melanie was talking about. Plus, I do like my air conditioning too. And then having the companies landing them, the LG project was partly based on all of our factors. So the access to natural resources and the environment for business that we've created here all goes to nothing if they can't power the plant. And then they're ironically building in the second phase grid level battery storage. So exactly what we're going to need for the renewable part of it. But it's important to note that we can't get to these goals without doubling basically everything. So we have to double the gas, we have to double the nuke. It's just that the renewable, the solar, we can put up quickly. and get that located and get it online while we're also building these others.
I think that was a great point that you raised, and I'll go back to you, Jim. But the fact that you're not picking one versus the other, that it's all of the above, that you have them working simultaneously, as some folks on here may or may not know, there, different forms of energy take different amounts of time to bring online and to get electrons on the grid. And so waiting for one until the other is done is probably not not a wise method. So Jim, it looked like you were going to add some more to that. And Blaze, if you have something to share there, please chime in.
Yeah, so the most comprehensive economic analysis that you could assemble that would identify exactly how much we need to construct, how it's going to impact the economy, all of that falls short of bad politics. And one of my biggest concerns is seeing directly on projects that we've worked on, uh, policymaker decisions, not based on economics, but based on, I kind of don't like how the solar panels look. And then you explain, well, you'd have to be on a 20-foot ladder on your car driving by in order to see the panels. And like, I still don't like it. We've seen 4 or 5 major solar projects derailed because of bad political decisions and uninformed individuals. And in one case, it was as few as 5 individuals derailed one of the projects, and they weren't even supervisors. So we have to figure out a way of educating the policymakers, but just like policymakers can take credit for creating jobs, they'll pat themselves on the back. I think when there's bad decisions, they need to take responsibility for maybe costing us a lot of jobs. And I think we have to bring these issues up a little bit more. One solar project went down, and it was a project in an area zoned for a solar project. So there's nothing that's guaranteed, but the politics is something that you just cannot control for.
And Jim is totally on with that. And kind of building off of that, and to Melanie's point earlier, I think that oftentimes there's a disconnection or a misunderstanding about what electricity is and what energy the system as a whole is. And I mean, honestly, I think that having not really been taught that in high school, in middle school, electricity is like magic, right? It just appears, like you have it, it's done, we're good. And oftentimes people don't fully recognize or fully appreciate, at least, the entire system that is required in order to generate that electricity, then actually get that extra electricity to your house or to wherever you're using it through transmission. So it really is a point and an opportunity for us to be able to provide additional education to communities across the state around what the actual infrastructure looks like, what our infrastructure needs are, so that way we can prevent any future, I honestly don't want to say the word brownout, but that, because it is definitely one of my biggest nightmares. I think another point that I want to mention before we move on is the focus on workforce. So that is something the governor has been very, very focused on as well. She recently launched the workforce subcabinet, and our office actually does chair the Green Jobs subcabinet. And so we're really engaging with a lot of partners from labor, from developers, the Commerce Authority, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, to try to really focus on and promote additional programs to help create the training that is necessary for us to have the workforce that is needed in energy, so that way we can continue to build the 21st century clean energy economy that the governor has really set out.
I appreciate you sharing that and everything that you guys just said. And as I was hearing you all speak, this is something that stood out to me for the chambers that are on this call. This is really the area where you play the biggest role. The work that you guys continually do in the community with the elected officials on a number of issues. This is another issue that's going to have great impact on your businesses. It's an opportunity to educate them, convene. You have resources. We're happy to continue to be a resource to you all. And then you also have, experts that are on this call. But I think that is important. To Melanie's point of making it relatable, what does this mean to your business? What does this mean to your employees? What does this mean to the community? And on a larger scale, as Blaze was mentioning, and Jim, that we're all in this together, regardless of whether we're in rural or we're in urban parts of the state. So Having said that, I think this is a pretty decent transition to looking at, what stands in the way or what might slow down the process. So I want to jump into a little bit of siting and permitting, land use issues. Jim, you kind of mentioned a project that was cited for solar and then actually didn't move forward with said solar project. But Blaze, I'm going to start with you on this one. Arizona obviously has a long-standing commitment to clean energy. I think it's fair to say that it's been an interesting year. Probably a lot of words you could put there for the clean energy on the policy front. Have any of the policies changes this year affected your office and how you guys are approaching clean energy? And then also, can you speak to the recent executive order that the governor signed, I believe, a week or a week and a half ago?
Yeah, definitely. You are definitely right. It has been quite the year for renewable energy. And we've definitely had to navigate the various changes that we've seen at the federal level. But to your first question about how uh, the changes at the federal level, if that has changed or revised our approach to clean energy policy, in short, the answer is absolutely not. In 2023, the governor set out a very clear vision of building a 21st century clean energy economy in Arizona, and we're absolutely committed to continuing to deliver on that promise and on that vision. Um, I think where you're seeing the slight changes or updates, if you will, are around the strategies by which we actually do that. We've had to adjust those with federal policy changes since January. Previously, our office, for example, had been taking full advantage of the once in a generation opportunity provided through the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. We pulled down, or at least we're set to receive roughly about $350 million in federal grants to deliver on affordable clean energy for Arizonans. We are actually doing part of that, and we are actually administering part of those $350 million. But unfortunately, changes at the federal level have really created intense uncertainty around our ability to actually move forward on all of those grants. One of the grants that we are moving forward with, for example, is called Efficiency Arizona. If you go to efficiencyarizona.com, there's a lot more information, but we provide appliance-specific rebates for low-income households throughout the state of Arizona, which is building contractor jobs, providing incentives to contractors to actually complete those jobs, especially in rural Arizona. But right now, we only have half of the dollars that are currently awarded to the state. The other half has been sitting at the Department of Energy since January, just waiting for them to give us the final thumbs up. So a lot of those changes at the federal level are truly having an impact on our ability to deliver on affordable energy, on energy efficiency programs, and our ability to deliver on a renewable goal that the governor has set in building that clean energy economy. Knowing that, the governor did sign about 2 weeks ago the Reducing Barriers to Delivering Affordable Energy for Arizona executive order. The executive order outlines a very comprehensive approach to delivering on affordable energy for Arizonans. Does quite a lot, so I'm not going to be able to fully describe everything that it does, but I'll give you some kind of overview, high level highlights. So one, it establishes the Arizona Energy Promise Task Force. And that task force is really responsible for developing the policy framework by which we can continue to grow Arizona's energy economy while delivering more affordable energy for Arizonans. We're also committed to leveraging state resources in a way that streamlines energy permitting throughout the state and any sort of processes of the state land department by which they would actually be able to lease and or otherwise use state land to site energy projects. Uh, in short, we're really just wanting to say that Arizona is open for renewable energy projects and energy developers, that we're committed to absolutely mobilizing all of the state agencies and all of our resources to expedite that future, and really expedite the future of energy in Arizona.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'll be sure to share information how people can learn a little bit more about the executive order. Jim, I want to shift to you a little bit. Same topic, siting and permitting issues. What would you say can be done in addition to what Blaze just outlined to improve the situation? And then how does siting reform connect to meeting the rising energy demand?
Well, we're going to need to be able to educate state and local decision makers on why we need to do these things, first of all. And just for some context, if our overall job growth forecast, let's say it was 2% a year, if it went down by just a tenth of a percentage point to 1.9 over the next 10 years, we would lose in total statewide tax collections $1.5 billion. If we really mess things up on energy, we might have double that. So we're talking about massive fiscal impacts, and that also translates into a lot of lost jobs. So sometimes providing that perspective is necessary, but I think what we have to do, and I know that Blaze is working on this, is not just identifying a strategic plan where we say we have to do a better job and then the document ends. We need to have to-do lists within some of these things. And as one example, one of our projects right now is we're working on a plan to take the state land department off the general fund, put it on the trust fund, expand their budget. It was my first agency that I worked on 2 or 3 decades ago at the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, and they've been underfunded ever since then. But if we can get them funded properly, we're not only going to be saving taxpayer money, but we're going to be creating more economic activity, and that'll make it easier for them to be working on issues like the siting of the lines and the substations and everything else that you're talking about. So it's one of those things where it's not going to be just 2 or 3 things that need to be done, and then next year we say we're good, let's move on. This is something we're going to have to keep working on because, and you asked earlier what businesses prefer. Businesses are asking more and more, what are the local policies of the cities that they're looking at for their locations in terms of green energy issues. And I've been a huge advocate of developing an environmental tech sector in Arizona. And I had a lot of friends say, so are you wearing Birkenstocks now? And I almost wanted to go get some just to wear down to the Capitol as a joke, but we're not talking about hugging trees. We're talking about what I've been saying, growing money trees, because in the past, you would see all of our economic development people fly to places like Israel and others to learn about more efficient irrigation systems, and we fly to other places. I think everybody should be flying to Arizona to learn about more efficient ways of doing the R&D and the manufacturing of products that are then deployed around the world. So it's not being a tree hugger, it's advancing our economy and helping the environment at the same time. You can do both, and we can have a huge economic benefit. And I have a feeling that when Blaze's effort, comes to a conclusion or partial conclusion, they're going to have pretty similar findings that there are great opportunities in these areas.
Thank you for sharing that. And as we move in that direction and become more of the, attracting folks in to research what we've been doing, exporting things out that we're able to create to address energy nationwide. I would also say that I'll be the first to buy you those Birkenstocks. So looking forward to that moment. I did want to remind folks, if they have a question, drop it in the Q&A function. There was one that was shared earlier, and I'm going to ask it to the group. So anybody feel free to chime in. What strategies specifically over the next few years will keep the state most competitive? For example, is it adding more energy storage, diversifying clean energy options, etc.?
Yes.
All right, I like that.
Everything
Blaze, you want to
that
add?
somebody can list, the answer is going to be yes, because the math does not work without everything at the table.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think from a state perspective, being able to take full advantage of leveraging state resources and state agencies and the expertise at state agencies is going to be key to our continued growth. That is why we're trying to prioritize, and we've tasked the state land department to identify ways in which they can expedite all of the processes involved with energy projects. Especially as a lot of renewable energy developers are seeking to take advantage of the expiring tax credits. We're really wanting to make sure that the state is not standing in a way of those projects moving forward. And so in the next about 2 weeks or so, State Land Department will have to our office a review of all of the processes that are in place now, and then identifying opportunities for us to actually expedite and streamline projects on state land. So I think that to your point, one of the things that we can deliver on is really state resources to get those projects permitted and built and deployed, empowering our homes businesses.
I would agree 100% as well. It's all of the above. Absolutely. And it's not just the energy itself, but it's everything, all the benefits that come from that, which is the jobs, which is the economic stability, all of those things that come from having that additional energy source as well. I think that, yeah, absolutely. All of the above, all the way around.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. I'd like to now shift gears a little bit into how chambers and EDOs, their members, and those that are impacted can influence Arizona's energy choices moving forward. So to do that, I'm going to start with you, Chris, as we look at some straightforward action folks can take, even without being energy experts, because I think that's a barrier for a lot of people. You've heard the phrase, you know enough to be dangerous, so it's best not to say anything. Hopefully after this call, you realize that the conversation needs to happen. It's happening whether you're at the table or not. So Chris, what would you add to that? What are the messages and messengers that have worked in your area, and what do you think folks should keep in mind?
Well, I think we're starting to see a couple of key trends. So we're going to have to start talking to people about not making bad policy decisions. Um, it's not about ideology or anything else. It's about math, as Jim pointed out. We got to have full production from gas. We have to have full production from nuclear. Um, Coal is not a big a factor here for us, but we're going to need that solar online as quickly as possible to keep up with the growth, or all of the steps we've taken over the past decade to transform our economy are going to be for naught as we come to a screeching halt. So really important to understand that it's a math problem, that we all have to be talking about it and addressing it. And then to address the NIMBYism, there's an idea that we shouldn't cite these things in rural areas because the power comes to the valley for our economic growth. So economic growth helps everybody no matter where it's located. TSMC is rippling through the entire state, even though it's up in the north part of Phoenix. So there's that aspect. And then there's the fact that we're all interconnected. So shortages in one area are going to adversely affect everybody. So we got to make sure that we line up with the math, make sure that our projects are fully supplied.
A great point. Melanie, I'm going to go to you because your community is so different from Chris's. What actions can you and your members, you've talked about some of it, but what can you guys take to facilitate more clean energy generation and just ultimately education around the topic?
I'm going to echo a lot of what you've already heard, and looking over my notes here, I said, well, we talked about that and we talked about, which is wonderful because we've heard this from everybody. So the top thing, of course, is advocate for innovation and investment in renewable energy. So important. And I think it's important for people to understand, and our businesses to understand, that this is chambers working together, but for businesses. But businesses and community members can do this too. You can write to your mayors and your city council members and your senators and your congressmen and your governor, and you can advocate for or against legislation. If it's positive for renewable energy, let them hear from you. We do that, but they need to hear from you as well. And so that's really important. So advocating, really, really important. Everybody can do that. And this is where I get into the point of, it's difficult for people to understand something so huge on their level. And so coming from our businesses level and our community members level, this is something they can do to have an impact. And so that's important. So definitely advocating, investing locally, talking to our businesses about things that they can do to save energy, maybe not renew at this point, but things that they can do is things as simple as change out the fluorescent bulbs with LED in your business. I mean, it can be that small, but it still has an impact. And so talking to them on their level, how can they affect this? How can they make change? And it doesn't have to be huge. It can be everybody doing a little bit of what they can do and understanding what that is. So I feel that's important, but then also having them, the local businesses partner with our solar developers, providing services, materials, workforce. That's so important as well. So getting our workforce ready. I think the most important thing is educate, though. That for me is huge. And I'll talk on a different level because 3 years ago, I didn't have an understanding of this. And so we have a 24-year-old leadership program here. And 3 years ago, we added an energy day to it. And so our future leaders spend a whole day with our providers here learning about energy and how it works, and that it's traded like stocks are traded, and where it comes from. And every time you flip the switch to turn your lights on, it means something different to those folks that have been through that program, because they get it now. They understand it, and they understand how important it is. And part of that day, of course, is renewable energy as well. And that renewable energy is important because no one of our energy sources works independently. They work differently. And just a quick example is, we get the solar power and we put it in batteries, and it gets used overnight and it gets depleted. And so the next day we have to use that again. So what do we use during that time that the solar is generating and putting it in? Anyway, that's layman's terms, but we just have to understand that it all works together. But I think educating our community is really important. And so with the ACC, we have brought down one of the commissioners to speak to our community down here and to talk about what they do. And so that's just another avenue for educating the community. So I think education for me is one of the top priorities, because the more people that understand, the more that will contact our legislators. And when it comes to good legislation that supports our energy needs. So collaborating cross sectors, as you know, chambers, we all talk to each other, right, Chris? We all talk to each other, and we work on things together, but with economic development groups as well. But I want to urge them all to work with their utility providers that they have locally and create those partnerships. It's so important to make sure that you have that, so that you do have an understanding and you know how to support the utility providers. And encourage regional planning to maximize the land, sun exposure, the transmission capabilities, and our name is regional partnership, and that's what it's all about. And pick your size of your region. It doesn't have to be just a southeastern Arizona. It can be Arizona. Pick your region and partner. If you don't partner together to achieve the same goal, then we're just working against each other. And so I feel like partnerships are how we get things done. So partnering is important, and then preparing our workforce, as we've already spoken about, preparing the workforce for the jobs that will come, the careers that will come. And then being imaginative and adaptive. Again, we need to be imaginative. We need to figure out that new energy source that we haven't quite figured out yet, and go from there, but being open to learning more about it. So that's kind of how I relay it to our region down here, but it's all about partnerships.
I appreciate you sharing that. I was going to ask a follow-up question to Jim, but before I do that, I'm going to ask one of the group. Looks like we had one dropped in the chat. Why are we seeing pushback from elected officials in rural areas against these clean and renewable energy projects? Do they have studies and data that backs up their claims that renewable energy projects don't create jobs in their communities? Who would like to
Well,
start
that's
with
what they
that? Go ahead, Jim.
believe. A lot of policymakers in some of the rural locations believe it's not generating enough jobs, but most of the decision making is based more on politics, because in these different counties that we're talking about, there's more than enough room to put in the solar plant, as well as the industrial park next to it, as well as additional business activity, kind of like what Melanie was talking about, where all this stuff strings together. And I think what's also missing, and I wanted to add one more category to Melanie's list, it's being more feisty than we've seen. And so when I started in politics, again, decades ago, people would stand up at the podium and they'd bang their fist a bit and they'd get really into it. And then afterwards they'd go get a beer and everybody was on good terms. but I haven't seen as much people being fired up about different political issues unless the economy is in bad shape. So when the economy is in bad shape, you tend to have more robust discussions and it gets a little bit more fiery. When the economy is in good shape, everybody just kind of goes along with it. I would like to see more people, you hear the story about somebody walks into a room and they see a glass. Some people, it's halfway filled. Some people say it's half full. Some people say it's half empty. Arizonans need to walk into that room and say, why isn't my glass full? We need to be a little bit more demanding, and I think we can, but it means we have to have leaders in these organizations taking a more aggressive role. And by aggressive, I don't mean walking up and punching a lawmaker. I'm talking about showing up at a hearing and explaining a position and being able to defend it because you have enough information. And also you have an alternative plan to work on. The worst thing to do, the worst thing that a complainer can do is to complain. And then when they're asked, well, what's the alternative? Them not have an answer. We have to have an answer if somebody says, well, what are the other choices?
A great
I
point.
don't know what community it is that they're speaking of. I have no idea, but I would say with the limited knowledge we have from this question, that it might go back to education. A lot of times people feel like, well, the energy we generate in our location, in our region, we get to keep that. And that's ours and we don't want to share it. And that's not how it works in any way, shape, or form. We give away energy, and maybe don't give it, but we sell energy when we have excess, and then we buy when we don't have excess, when we need it. And that's how it works. And so sometimes you have different regions or areas that'll feel like, well, we want to keep the energy that we generate. And it just doesn't work that way. And so I just kind of go back to, and I'm guessing this may or may not be the issue, but education is so important. Maybe just make sure all of our legislators are educated on how that process works.
And I think honestly, I would add to both what Jim and Melanie are saying, and that I think it does go, it really is both of those things, honestly. So what we're seeing, especially at the county boards of supervisors, we're seeing a strong pushback against energy projects writ large. I mean, the strongest is obviously against wind and solar, against storage, but it really is just writ large. And I think, unfortunately, Jim is right. I think it is political in nature. I don't think that it's necessarily founded in um, rationalized arguments, but rather just politically driven. And a misunderstanding and the lack of education that Melanie is exactly speaking about. There's really a need for additional education throughout the state about the benefits of siting projects in your communities and what that means financially for those communities. And the state needs to be doing a much better job than we are of sharing the stories about how those property taxes, how the taxes that are paid by projects are really impacting and benefiting local communities. Right now, that's a project we're working on in the governor's office right now, is to identify a way to share that message, because we don't currently have a good way to share that message. But that's something we're working on. And I think it gets to your point, Melanie, that that's part of the storytelling, the education that we need to be able to provide for local communities.
I think
Chris, go ahead.
I think we need to make sure that everybody understands what the cost of a misstep is, because it is mostly politically driven. So if it takes a few years to bring one of these projects online so that it's actually producing, all of the time that we spend arguing or pushing back or delaying, we're going to be short in the future. That air conditioning is not going to turn on. That project's not going to be able to site here. We will slow down the economy. And
You know,
I don't think people realize that how fast we need to be acting right now.
yeah, and Colin, sorry, if I can add one other thing to the question that was asked about just why we're seeing that pushback too. So I think one thing that I've noticed, especially for a couple of projects that are looking to be sited on state lands in particular, um, there's kind of an interesting misunderstanding about what state lands are. Um, and in many communities, we're seeing that people are viewing state lands as their land, their like recreational land, and they own that piece of land as a community, even though they're owned by the state for the benefit of the trustees of state land. Um, and so when we are looking to cite a project that would benefit local communities and the trustees of the state land trust, we're seeing pushback because it's taking away areas that families have gone for hiking or gone for using their off-highway vehicles. And so I think there's a something that we need to rectify between those 2 points as well, is being able to share the story about how important it is and how much we want to focus on recreation for families and how there are many opportunities for that throughout the state. And also state lands is there to benefit the trustees of the state trust. And we need to be able to use those state lands in order to get the revenue that the state needs to continue to deliver on what the state actually does need. And so we do need to have that conversation statewide, and we haven't quite been able to do that yet either.
I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm gonna give you guys one fire round thing as we wrap up here. Think about 15 to 30 seconds on this. I'm gonna talk while I'll give you guys a chance to think about it. A year from now, we're all on the same call. Folks that are attending are here. We will have met more of our energy demand if we have done what is that one thing? I know there's a lot on the table. I'll start with you in a second, Jim, but let me just let folks know in the chat we have links to the need to know for what the OBA, what that means to chambers, what it means to the business community as it relates to energy. There's a link there. Data center that I mentioned earlier about balancing that. And then the last thing, our chamber toolkit. If you've never been to our website, chambersforinnovation.com, you can join our mailing list. You can get a lot of information on chamber toolkits of what to do next. We have our power lines that come out every other week, which is our newsletter, Energizing Economies. Be happy to talk to you a little bit more about that. But I bought you all enough time. Jim, what would your answer be?
Well, we were asked, why can't government be more run like a business? And we said, okay, well, if it is, then the government would invest in high ROI projects. And you'd be surprised the different types of projects that can produce a high ROI. It could be foster kid reform, it could be childcare, it could be transportation support. It's all sorts of things. It's not just a tax cut or a tax credit. So there's lots of things. And somebody had a really good question, so I want to go there. And it's if businesses are starting to place some weight on wanting to have more renewables as part of their production process because customers are, then that means that the private sector is taking this seriously. All right, if we're going to run government like a business, then we have to take this seriously too. So we can't have it both ways. Run government like a business, bring these business principles in, and then let's follow them and we'll be in good shape.
Appreciate that. Melanie, what do you have?
Well, I'd have to go back to education. So educating on a larger scale on just how energy works and how important everybody's role is in it. And then really supporting innovation and our entrepreneurs when it comes to renewable energies. I think that's really important, is looking at that, looking at our younger generation, listening to what they have to say. They actually know the way, we just have to listen to them. And so really, really supporting the high schoolers and our young college students and our entrepreneurs and hearing what they have to say and hearing their innovation.
Thank you. Chris?
I'd say massive siting and permitting reform, both at the federal and state level. We got to clear the decks and get these projects underway.
Couldn't agree more. And Blaze, bring us home.
So I think kind of not to steal Chris's, but I would say that's part of it. For sure is my answer as well. I think that delivering on the governor's vision for a 21st century clean energy economy, making sure that reducing barriers to really deploying projects on state lands, and really delivering the affordable energy promise that we need to do, that we need to achieve on, that we need to deliver for Arizona families.
Thank you very much, Melanie, Chris, Jim, Blaze. Great conversation. I hope you all attending today were able to have a lot of takeaways from it. As I mentioned, there are things in the chat as well as our state clean energy permitting and siting brief. Thank you for joining us again. Look forward to connecting in the future. As I mentioned, this webinar is recorded, so you will be getting an email with the link to our website and to YouTube. Thank you all again for joining us, and you all have a great rest of the day.